Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons here, joined by Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, and it is Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Chris, let's talk about these keys to victory for each one of these teams. What are sort of the three things that you need to see from the Kansas City Chiefs in order for them to walk away with a victory?
So the big thing for me, and I will say I'm probably going to continue to have this until the Chiefs actually do something about it and end up on the right side of it, but it's win the turnover battle. Go watch the game against the Bengals. They had 3 turnovers versus the Bengals 1 turnover. They could have had 4 if you look at the penalty they got, or the one they got called back on penalty. You have to take care of the ball better, and the only way to beat teams, regardless of how good they are, and there's questions whether or not Cincinnati was a good team going into that game last week. But the big thing is if you give up the ball 3 times and you give up your possessions, you're not going to generally win games. You cannot continually do that and beat the good teams or even mediocre teams, I don't think, on a regular basis. So to me, the first one is win the turnover battle, keep control of the ball, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Okay. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's pressuring Patrick Mahomes is one big key. As I mentioned with the stats, that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes become a little bit more human when you can get him on the ground. And again, I think you got to take advantage of that one weakness at the left tackle position that several teams so far have been able to exploit, and the Falcons have to find a way to exploit it even further. And that's going to lead to, potentially a big day for Matthew Dijon. And this is potentially the game that they're going to need him to show why they traded for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I look at, my second key to victory for Kansas City, it's, just do your job. And that goes back to what you were just talking about, the left tackle doing his job, keeping Judon at bay. But it also comes down to catching the ball when the ball is thrown to you, and Mahomes making good decisions. And it also goes back to not making penalties. If you can do those things, just doing your job, I think you have a great chance of walking out of this game with a victory because, if they play basic fundamental football and are successful on a regular basis, then I think that they're going to score points, and it should be a game that they should be able to win.
Well, when you're talking about doing your job, my second key is someone do the job of blocking Chris Jones. If you can do that, good luck. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that being my job. I just get to talk about it on the podcast. But good luck to whoever is tasked with that. As you mentioned earlier in today's episode, Chris Jones lines up in a number of places. We'll probably see him going up against Falcons right tackle Caleb McGarry. We'll probably see him going up against both guards, Chris Lindstrom and Matthew Bergeron, and maybe they'll even have him go up against Jake Matthews, as you mentioned. Several of those guys tend to be a little bit more vulnerable to power than other guys, and so that's really where Chris Jones makes his hay as a pass rusher, where he can just use that length and that size and that physicality and just, walk you back into the quarterback. And that could be really problematic with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who isn't necessarily the most mobile quarterback at this stage, will not be doing all the Patrick Mahomes magic outside the pocket that we've seen on a regular basis there. So it's going to be really important to keep Chris Jones at bay however you can, whether that's chips, whether that's doubles, whether that's keeping, 2 running backs in the backfield, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, to kind of help out there. So the Falcons have to figure out some way to keep that top pass rusher at bay, something that they did not do in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt.
Yeah, you make a great point about Chris Jones with his power, but I will say this. The one thing that you continuously see from time to time is people try to be ready for that power and they overset themselves, and he takes advantage of it and uses speed to get around him and pushes their hands down. So that's something that they got to watch out for as well. The other big key to victory for me, if you're Kansas City, is you have to make it a one-dimensional game on the Atlanta side. Take away the run. Bring up a safety into the box, slow down the Atlanta running game. And one of the biggest reasons why that is such a big key in this game is because you're in a situation where the Chiefs have consistently had struggles late in the game with, especially against the Baltimore Ravens, where conditioning looked like it was a little bit of an issue, and you're not going to have a ton of guys that are going to be up and able to help you on a regular basis. So to me, it's make this a one-dimensional offense, stop the running game, and then make Kirk beat you with his decision-making and his throws. If you can do that, I think you have to feel pretty good because I think the Chiefs secondary can be ready for it.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to not only that first dimension for the Falcons offense, running the football. I think the last key for me is that second dimension, which is get Kyle Pitts going. It would be nice to see Kyle Pitts having a big game on a national spotlight so that the narrative about, him being overrated or him being a bust and all these various things that seem to surround Kyle Pitts, who is a heck of a football player, but just hasn't necessarily put out the production. And as we've mentioned already on today's episode, the Kansas City Chiefs have struggled in the first two games covering tight ends. As Chris mentioned, Isaiah Likely and Mike Gesicki are good tight ends. I don't think either one of those guys is on the level of an athlete like Kyle Pitts. So it will be nice to see Zach Robinson being able to feature Kyle Pitts and attack that vulnerability in the Kansas City defense and get Kyle Pitts going. And that's going to create opportunities for some of the other weapons outside. And especially if you can couple that with the ground game spearheaded by Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, that is going to give you a complete offense that will allow you to at least try to keep pace with this Kansas City offense should Patrick Mahomes do Patrick Mahomes things as he so often does in, a dome stadium. So, the environment's going to be conducive for him to do Patrick Mahomes things. So, it's going to be an exciting game regardless of what the result is going to be. But Chris, we'll leave out on sort of what's your final prediction for this Sunday night matchup between the Falcons and Chiefs?
I think the last time I can remember them playing in Atlanta, Mahomes had a 75-yard pass to Tyreek Hill. I'd like to see something like that again to Xavier Worthy. Don't know that we'll see it in this game, but that was a fun I think it was a preseason game, but it was a lot of fun. When I look at this, it's a question of can Kansas City put up the points on the board, and I think that they can. I think that you look at what Mahomes and the Chiefs were able to do. The offense only scored, 19 points on the Bengals. 20 points because they went for 2 and they didn't get it. So that's not horrible of an offensive output. 27 points the first week against the Ravens. So I feel like they're going to be able to score points. The question is, are the Falcons going to be able to keep up? I think Kansas City's defense is playing not necessarily where they were last year, but I think they're playing well enough to slow the Falcons offense down. I'm going to go, 27-20 Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that's about where I'm at. As I mentioned earlier, I think Steve Spagnuolo has a history of keeping the lids on, whether it's Kyle Shanahan, whether it's Sean McVay, whether it's Zach Taylor, Kevin O'Connell, et cetera. And so I'm not expecting Zach Robinson to be the exception as opposed to the rule. So that feels like the Falcons are probably going to score around 20 points. I don't know if that's enough against this Chiefs offense, who feels like a pretty comfortable that they're going to score around 24 points. I think because of some of the issues that we've discussed on today's Crossover Thursday, I don't expect the Chiefs to put up monster points like that we have seen this offense do before, but I'm expecting this to be a 24-20 Chiefs win. I think a very competitive game. I think it will come down to the wire in those final minutes. And unfortunately, it might be decided on who has the ball last, as we saw last week against Kirk Cousins against the Eagles. If the Falcons have the ball last, good things happen. But of course, the Chiefs know that they got 7+ years of that other guy having the ball last, and he tends to find ways to get the wins. And so I do expect that to be the case. So Falcons maybe potentially fall 1-2. Chiefs continue their undefeated streak.